Today's story is so haunting, it lingers long after the last word unfolding amid dusty roads, creaking porches, and endless skies. This is where a widow's loss crosses paths with a man who doesn't back down. It all starts with a body found face down in cold water, something seemingly simple that sets a deadly chain of events in motion. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. She did not cry out when she found Owen Whitlock lying face down in the cold bend of the Powder River. The scream tore out of her only the next morning when she saw Caleb Ashford riding toward her through the drifting dust. Nora Whitlock had been a widow. Barely 3 months, and in Sheridan that was already long enough for a woman to fade into the background. Still, the fear in her eyes that morning made every ranch hand along the street glance twice. No one dared ask why she rode so hard through town with her dress torn and her fingers trembling on the reins. She didn't slow for the blacksmith. She passed the saloon where 2 men spat tobacco near her horse. She rode past the church steps, ignoring the preacher's soft nod of pity she didn't trust. She kept going until she reached the one ranch people said belonged to a man who feared nothing. If he turned her away, there was nowhere left to run. Caleb Ashford was a name most folks in Sheridan spoke only in low voices. Some called him a quiet storm. Others said he was the reason the old Bozeman Trail still had a lawman alive. But everyone agreed on one thing: if trouble found you and you had no other road to take, you rode to Ashford's place and hoped he wasn't in a foul mood. Nora didn't pray. She jumped down hard and walked straight toward him while he was setting salt for a young roan. Caleb looked up slowly, eyes calm as dawn, and she felt certain those eyes could read every lie a man had ever fed her. For the first time since the burial, she felt truly seen, not as a widow in black, but as a woman standing her ground. He asked if anyone had followed her. She nodded. Then she told him everything. The fences cut near her ranch at the edge of the Bighorn foothills. Stones dropped into her well. A shape passing her window at midnight. A voice near the barn murmuring that a woman alone had no claim to land in Wyoming territory. Caleb listened without a blink. Wind dragged dust across his boots. The roan flicked its ears uneasy. Out here, even horses sensed when a storm was forming, and this one didn't smell like rain. When Nora finally spoke the name Briggs Holloway, Caleb's jaw tightened, once sharp and brief, like an old wound shifting under the skin. He knew that name. Everyone did. Cattle baron, land taker, the man who called Owen's death an accident on the trail. Nora stepped closer, her voice breaking. She said she wasn't asking for sympathy. She was there because someone wanted her land, someone wanted her gone, and she needed a man who didn't spook easily. Caleb wiped his hands, glanced toward the mountains, then studied her, as if weighing how much fire she still carried. He asked a single question, low and steady, the kind that sets the course before the first step is taken. "Are you ready for the truth that comes with this?" Nora answered with one of her own. "What if the truth is worse than the man who killed my husband?" Caleb swung into the saddle without another word. Nora rode beside him all the way back to the Whitlock place, forcing her thoughts away from the look in his eyes when she had spoken Holloway's name. It wasn't fear. It was colder, like a memory he had no desire to revisit. By the time they reached the ranch, the afternoon sun had turned Wyoming into hard gold, stretching every shadow longer than it should have been. Nora kept talking to keep the ghosts at bay. She pointed out the sagging fence, the scattered hay, the dull thud she'd heard behind the barn. Caleb only nodded, crouching to study boot prints she'd never noticed. He offered no explanation. He never spoke it aloud, but when he straightened, Nora saw the truth in his face. Proof. Someone had been there. Caleb moved toward the porch, where a heavy hay bale sat half-split, wedged against the old storage crate Nora had struggled with earlier that morning. The memory made her flush. She'd strained against it for nearly 10 minutes before admitting defeat. Caleb rapped his knuckles against the side, testing the boards, then glanced at her with the faintest curve of a smile. "Too heavy for you," he said evenly. "Sit on it. I want to check what's wrong with these braces." His tone was calm, almost dry, but it still made her huff under her breath and feel her pulse kick. It irritated her how easily a man like him could do that, especially one who spoke so little. She stepped closer, gathered her skirt so it wouldn't catch, and lowered herself carefully, giving him room to look beneath the frame. That was when she heard it, a dry, brittle rattle like seeds shaken inside a tin. It came from directly beneath her boots. Nora froze, breath-locked tight. She looked down, just as a thick rattlesnake slid free from the straw, its tail buzzing, head lifting, eyes fixed on the spot where she had been about to sit. She gasped, staggered back, her heel clipping the porch edge as she went down hard. Caleb lunged without thinking. His arm wrapped her waist, keeping her upright as they nearly toppled together. Her hands clutched his shirt, her breath uneven against his chest. Then the crack of a gunshot split the air. One shot, clean and final. The snake dropped motionless. Nora stared at the dead coil lying exactly where her legs had been. 1 second sooner, and it would have ended right there. Her skin crawled, stomach turning, and for the first time she questioned whether the snake had wandered there by chance. When Caleb lifted the body to inspect it, the change in his expression sent a chill through her. A rope mark circled the tail. He held the rattler like evidence, not like an animal. She watched his eyes, narrow, steady, precise, the way a tracker reads ground for sign. He turned the snake slightly, and the mark showed again, a thin groove pressed deep into the scales, as if someone had tied it, carried it, and placed it exactly where she'd nearly sat. Anger rose along her arms, sharper than fear. She'd thought she buried the worst of it with Owen. She'd been wrong. Someone wanted her gone, scared off, or dead. And that someone knew her routines, her steps, the quiet moments she spent on that porch each morning. Caleb set the snake aside and brushed his hands clean, slow, and controlled. He didn't swear. He didn't raise his voice. He simply looked worn down by men who believed the land belonged to them by force. He asked if she'd noticed anything missing, shifted, or out of place. She shook her head, though she remembered the hay bale sitting wrong, fence rails tucked beneath it, like they'd been moved in haste. Caleb circled the porch, studying the ground. Nora followed, watching how he marked scuffed dirt and crushed straw with a tilt of his chin, details she would have missed. Then he stopped near the corner of the house and crouched, focusing on a single boot print cut deep into the soil. A heel notch, sharp and familiar. The same kind she'd seen on the boots worn by Jed Kincaid. Her throat tightened. Caleb didn't say the name. He didn't have to. Nora whispered it instead. "It's Briggs Holloway." "It has to be." Caleb wiped his hands on his jeans, stared toward the distant trees, and let the silence stretch. Some things didn't need words. They both knew only one man fit those tracks. Caleb told her they wouldn't wait for another snake or hope the law stepped in. They'd take control, draw the man out, and end it before Holloway finished what he started. The plan he outlined was simple. The danger in it set Nora's pulse pounding high in her throat. She wasn't the woman she'd been 3 months earlier. Something in her had hardened, settled into place, ready to push back. Caleb asked if she was ready, truly ready, because once they stepped onto this path, there would be no turning aside. Nora looked from the dead rattler to the tracks pressed into the dirt. then to the man who had caught her when she fell. She gave a single steady nod. Sleep barely touched her that night, not from fear, but from the way Caleb's plan circled her thoughts like a hawk over open ground. By first light, they were already moving through the ranch, quiet and deliberate, setting each piece exactly as he intended. He told her the secret to catching a man like Briggs Holloway was simple. You didn't hunt him. You made him believe he was hunting you. Nora understood her role. Late that morning, she rode into Sheridan boots, dusted white hair loose, wearing the look of a woman worn down. She stopped at the general store, then the livery, and finally walked straight past the saloon where Holloway liked to sit on warm days. She didn't acknowledge him. That alone ensured his eyes followed her. Each step along that boardwalk felt like crossing a ledge without a rail. When he stepped out and asked if she was all right, she let her shoulders sag just enough to sell it. She said she hadn't slept, said a snake had nearly bitten her, said Caleb Ashford had gone back to his own place and she'd be alone tonight at the Whitlock Ranch. Her voice shook when she added, "I've been thinking. Maybe you were right about selling. A woman can't hold land alone forever." Then she delivered the line Caleb had drilled into her. "I don't know if I can keep fighting this. Maybe selling would be easier." Holloway smiled the way a cat does when the coop door finally cracks. He wished her well and said he hoped she chose wisely. Nora inclined her head, turned her horse, and rode home calm as a circuit preacher. The moment she reached the ranch, the act fell away. Caleb was already in the loft, checking his rifle. Two of his men, Tate Hollis and Cole Yarrow, waited near the windmill, out of sight. For the first time in months, Nora felt something like safety. Evening dropped fast. The sky deepened to purple, the heat bled from the land until even the grass seemed to hold its breath. She lit a single lamp and left the front door cracked, just careless enough. She sat at the table, heart hammering like a drum in a meeting hall. When the hoofbeats came, she counted 3 slow, measured hunters rather than guests. Nora stood and wrapped her fingers around the small pistol Caleb had pressed into her hand. She reminded herself she wasn't bait. She was part of the snare. What happened tonight would decide whether she stayed a target or claimed this ground as her own. A shadow filled the doorway. A man stepped in with a bandana at his neck and a grin that spoke of practice. He told her to pack her things and come quiet. She told him to go to hell. What followed was rough and ugly and real. Nora swung a block of wood into his face, knocking him off balance. She fired once into the floor, not to hit, but to summon the thunder she knew was waiting in the dark. The gunshot tore through the night and brought Caleb Ashford out of the dark like a strike of lightning. The trap snapped shut, but what waited beyond the house wasn't what he expected. A man crouched behind the barn, and instead of menace, there was terror written all over him. Caleb rounded the corner with his rifle shouldered, ready to end it, but the figure by the water trough wasn't aiming back. He was trembling, palms raised, eyes flicking like a cornered animal. He whispered over and over that he never meant to hurt Nora Whitlock, that he'd come only because Briggs Holloway forced him. Holloway had paid extra for the snake, he said. Holloway meant to burn the ranch after taking Nora away. That was when it settled in for Nora. This wasn't just about fences and dirt. It was about erasing her name. The man's voice cracked, worn thin by a long road of fear. Caleb lowered his rifle just enough to let him breathe, stepped closer, and asked the question Nora had carried for months. Why did Holloway want her land so badly? The answer spilled out a new cattle route. Holloway planned to seize a shortcut cutting straight through the Whitlock place, profit control, and a tighter grip on Sheridan. Nora stood in the doorway, dust in her hair pistol still shaking in her hand, and felt something inside her shift. Not fear, not anger, but something firmer. Caleb signaled to Tate Hollis and Cole Yarrow, and together they took the man into town. Before dawn, Sheridan woke to a confession that spread like wildfire: murder threats, the snake, the plan to burn the ranch. It was enough for Sheriff Nolan Briggs to ride out with 10 men and drag Briggs Holloway off his polished porch before breakfast. When it was done, the town felt changed, quieter, lighter. Hats tipped to Nora for the first time, not out of pity, but respect. Carrying that weight felt strange, but it fit, and she hadn't carried it alone. That evening, Nora and Caleb sat on the same hay bale where the rattler had waited. The sky over the big horns held that soft gold that comes only after a storm breaks. Caleb told her the land tests people the same way life does. You don't choose the hard days, he said, only how you stand through them. Nora smiled and told him she was done standing alone. Caleb said nothing for a long moment. Then he turned her hand, palm up, traced the calluses she'd earned these past months with a careful thumb, and closed her fingers in his own. Sometimes life knocks you down so you can see who will help you rise. Sometimes fear shows you strength you didn't know you had. And sometimes the person you trust most arrives the moment you stop running. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. We appreciate you more than you think. If this tale stirred something deep inside, we invite you to remain part of this frontier of memories. More true stories of honor, compassion, and destiny are waiting for you here. Subscribe, share, comment, and thank you for riding with us today. Aviso legal barra disclaimer. Our content is designed for artistic and entertainment purposes and may reinterpret historical themes using fictional touches. We apply AI tools thoughtfully only to support production while keeping human supervision over editing, emotional tone, and narrative coherence. We always comply with regulatory guidelines for AI-based media and avoid deepfake practices or identity manipulation. All supporting components remain legally sourced. Please ask for authorization before sharing or adapting any segment. Your respect makes it possible for us to continue telling meaningful stories.